So, Dr. Zahi Hawass, one of the most famous Egyptologists alive, was recently asked about the Egyptians' Kings List, and his response, frankly, it surprised me. Sup guys, so this is going to be a little bit of a different video. It's not going to be the typical stories that I do, but I wanted to address something very important that came up in the recent Joe Rogan's podcast with Dr. Zahi Hawass. So, for those who don't know who Dr. Zahi Hawass is, he's an Egyptian Egyptologist with over 50 years of experience working in the Giza Plateau, so the guy is obviously very knowledgeable, very experienced. He's also the former Ministry of Antiquities at Egypt, and he's been known to contest against people like Graham Hancock and Dr. Robert Schoch. Graham Hancock, he's an author, proponent of this idea that this once global civilization influenced all the known civilizations that we know, like the ancient Egyptians and the Sumerians. As I mentioned before, he's also heavily criticized Dr. Robert Schoch, who is a geologist from the University of Boston, who, alongside the late John Anthony West, they together proposed the idea that the erosion patterns around the Sphinx enclosure were actually caused by water erosion, not wind erosion as it's commonly believed. The implications of this being that the Sphinx is actually way older than what we currently understand to be true. So this would actually push back the construction of the Sphinx way past Khafre's time, who's the pharaoh that's thought to be responsible for the construction of the Sphinx. And all that is super interesting, but what actually motivated me specifically to make this video was when he was asked by Joe Rogan about the Egyptians' Kings List. This is what he had to say.
Have you heard about about the Kings List, right? The old Kings List that goes back 30,000 whatever years.
Who said that?
You never seen it? It's not in hieroglyphs?
This is not true.
It's not true?
All. No. This is a speculation from people who knows nothing about history. There is nothing King List dated back 30,000 years ago at all.
So why do people keep saying that?
Because they don't know. It's speculation. Give me one evidence of that. The first King List dated back to Dynasty 5. Only.
I was definitely confused by this response here because we definitely do have a Kings List. As a matter of fact, we have two different Kings Lists. The first Kings List would be what's referred to as the Abydos King List. This list is located in the Temple of Seti, and its main purpose was to legitimize King Seti's rule. This list is chronological, but it's a little selective in the sense that it actually writes off a bunch of different pharaohs that were considered to be unworthy of being on the list, mainly for political reasons and to reinforce Seti's rule. And we have the Turin Canon list. This is actually thought to be the most historical accurate one, and it was discovered in 1820, and it's not really written in any temple or anything like that. This was discovered in a papyrus and is currently sitting in Turin, Italy. This is the list that probably Joe was referring to because it actually contains a lot of mythological characters like Ra, Osiris, and so forth, whose reigns were supposed to have lasted thousands of years. So clearly these aspects of the list are myth, but I was actually a little bit surprised at Zahi's reaction, pretty much denying that the list exists in the first place. It's clear from watching the episode that there was probably a little bit of a language barrier going on, so probably Zahi just misunderstood the question. I want to believe that that's what actually happened, not that he was outright denying it, knowing that it's actually true. But yes, both lists are very real, and they're relatively well known, so again I was a little bit surprised by his reaction. Here's actually a quote from the American Research Center in Egypt. It reads, "The majority of king lists from ancient Egypt, including the Abydos Kings List, date to the New Kingdom, 1570 to 1069 BC, and except for the Turin Canon, were carved in stone on temple walls and hieroglyphs. They served as cultic rather than historic function. They were not meant to be literal chronological lists and should not be treated as such. The Turin Canon, on the other hand, was written on papyrus in the cursive hieratic script and is the most complete and historically accurate. It included ephemeral kings and queens that were normally excluded from other lists, as well as the lengths of their reigns. It is, therefore, an extremely valuable historical document." Now I want to talk a little bit about the Abydos Kings List and why certain names are actually omitted. These were mainly for political reasons, as I mentioned before, to legitimize Seti's rule. There is a concept in Latin called Damnatio memoriae. I probably butchered the name a little bit there, but the term refers to condemnation of memory. This is actually a Roman term, but the concept existed long before, especially in Egypt. The Egyptians believed that erasing a person's name and image could obliterate their soul from the afterlife. In Egypt, this was applied to rulers who were seen as heretics or illegitimate for some reason. This would even extend to destroying monuments in their name, defacing statues, and erasing them from kings lists like the one at Abydos. Notable victims of erasure include Hatshepsut, a successful female pharaoh who had her images and cartouches destroyed by her stepson Thutmose III, likely to reinforce the traditional male succession. Akhenaten, who introduced the radical monotheistic worship of Aten, was vilified after his death and scrubbed from records by later dynasties, trying to restore more conservative religious beliefs. So as you can see, these omissions were not mistakes, these were very calculated political moves. Now let's talk about why Seti I commissioned the Abydos Kings List in the first place. Seti was the second ruler of the 19th dynasty, the son of Ramses I, a former military official who came to power after the death of another pharaoh called Horemheb, who died childless and had no royal lineage. That made Seti's family new to royalty, and their legitimacy was not really accepted by everyone at the time. So by commissioning a monument that traces his reign back to Egypt's earliest, most revered kings, Seti was creating a visual lineage that reinforced his legitimacy as a ruler. And what better way of doing that than by being engraved in a temple, invoking the spirits of the approved kings, while denying the ones that would weaken his narrative, like heretics or usurpers. The entire layout of the Abydos Kings List, Seti performing rituals with his son Ramses beside him, reading names of great pharaohs, is a carefully curated piece of political theater. So when Hawass says that the Kings List are not true, we have to ask ourselves, well, true in what sense? They may not be completely scientific timelines. The one at Abydos was clearly modified for political reasons, and the Turin Canon list definitely includes a lot of mythological characters, and aspects that are clearly, well, not true. But the lists themselves, they do exist, and a lot of the pharaohs that are mentioned in these lists are actually accepted by Egyptology. So with that being said, I don't think it's correct to just write them off as pure nonsense. But what do you guys think? Is it fair to dismiss these ancient records, or should we take them more seriously? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today wasn't really a tale, but I just had to put my 2 cents on this topic. But yeah, if you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, comment, share. All that really helps a lot. And until the next time, farewell, and may the gods smile upon you.